Good morning, everybody. Again, this is Phil, the miniature model maker, and we are continuing our build of the Gundam Artifact Series 1, Model 1, Rick Diaz. So today we are working on gap filling, gluing, cleaning, in preparation for painting of the model. That's probably going to take a little while. Yesterday's stream went for about an hour and I got very little done. So I did do some work off camera, and I probably will continue to do that until we get this ready. But I wanted to continue sharing the process. So what I have done so far is on both legs, feet. I've used some Tamiya putty in some places for some of the bigger holes to try that out. And I used some cyanoacrylic glue. This is glue from an aquarium company, but it's a gel type cyanoacrylic glue. Some people use that for a gap filler, I've seen. And then I also tried some Mr. Surfacer 500 for various things. And we'll see which works the best for my needs on this project. The Tamiya, that's the first time I used it. It was a little pasty, so I did mix it with some extra thin cement. I went and did a little bit of searching around, and even on the label for the putty, it says use a lacquer thinner. I didn't have any lacquer thinner, and some folks recommended trying the extra thin cement because by odor, it smells like it's mostly acetone, and that will work to thin a lot of organic based materials, putties and things. We used to use it in the lab to clean all of our organic chemistry stuff. So it's definitely a good organic solvent. So that's what we're going to do. I've done both of the legs and feet, and we're going to get back to now going with the body. I think I want to do big parts first because they're easier to see. Now, I was thinking something today. These orange parts have a whole lot of glare on the on screen, so I'm going to try a couple things on the next build that I did a little bit of experimentation on earlier. Maybe doing some panel lining or just straight up shading of the parts will make them easier to show up on camera. See, that does, it's still a little glare, but the panel lining seems to help some. So I think on our next build, or possibly the next portion of the step for this particular one, I'll do a little bit of shading on it to see if it reads better on the camera. So that's something to look forward to. But at the moment, I would really like to get these at least assembled so I can move on to the next step, which is going to be more interesting. I got the airbrush station set up yesterday, which I'm pretty excited about because that opens up some possibilities with painting as well. I probably won't paint the artifacts right away. I have other things that I can do that I would try. Right now I have a whole bunch of old Citadel paints, and they're very good paints. Citadel makes some excellent paints, but we all know they have issues as well. And I would really like to find possibly a different brand of paint to use on everything. So I'm not going between a lot of brands. That just makes my need for consistency and uniformity happy. It's nothing at all against Citadel paints. I've used them a lot and will continue to use them. I just have a whole bunch of models that they may not be quite as good for. I do like acrylics. I prefer acrylics, and I'm going to stay in the acrylic world. For various reasons. They're what I'm used to working with. I don't want to have the fumes, the solvent fumes going around my house because my cats like to stay in my room with me. It's cold here. So that's going to rule out most of the enamels and lacquers. And also on minis, I find that acrylics are just a better paint. They have better working time on these little models. And like if I make a mistake, I can just grab some water and go boop, 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 and we're done. That's fixed. So we will see how all that goes. But at the moment, I am trimming down the body of the Rick Diaz to get it put together. And had a lot of fun with these sanding sticks yesterday. Very glad I got them. And I like to try things, see what works, see what doesn't. So far, these have worked really well with the double-sided tape. I do know there are a lot of good, very high-quality brand foam sanding sticks with various grit sandpaper on them. They tend to be a little bit too big for what I like. These are pretty thin. This I think this is the biggest of all of the sticks that I got, and it's about 2 millimeters thick. Where's my 2? Yep, that's the 2 mil thickness. That's about as thick as I want. And some of the other sanding sponges that people use on full-size models are a little bit big for me. So what I've done is I've ordered some small double-sided tape sponges, the kind that you use for putting like pictures and things on your wall. They're fairly thin. They're a sponge base. Like the physical structure of it is a sponge, so it's soft. And it's got tape adhesive on both sides. So I can use my sheets of different grit sandpapers and cut them out like I have been here. Because even a 400 grit or 600 grit on these guys can be kind of rough. Again, you got to think about the scale of these guys. They're small and the details on them are small. So even what would normally be considered a fairly light scratch from a 400 grit sandpaper on a larger model at this scale is pretty significant. So I normally don't use anything larger grit than 600 for normal sanding. If I've got a nub or something that really needs to be ground down, excuse me, then I will use 400 grit. Okay. That's pretty good. And then this guy, that's a whole lot easier. We can just run it across like that. And I'm giving this a light initial sanding to make the edges more uniform. because sometimes the mold, there are little rise, little bumps and things on there that would create a space, a gap between the two parts if you didn't remove them. And any effort we can take to make sure that gaps aren't a thing between our parts, we will do. All right, so there's still something up there at the top that we need to find. And I've shaved the pegs down. But I think maybe, what is it? Ah, it's that. I need to file that down just a little bit. And that's going to be where our head's going to stick to. So I'm not going to file down the top edge, but I will just smooth this out a bit. And see how it goes now. That's a little bit better. But maybe still we can get the sides of these guys put down a bit. And that might help the fit as well. And I may be a bit more quiet today with both streams the past 2 days. Excuse me. I have kind of talked myself out. We'll see. I can possibly just ramble and ramble and ramble. I'm looking forward to the time when the first person comes in and comments. I've had a few people pop in really quickly during these streams, and I don't know if it's a camera thing or lack of interest thing or what, that they pop in, they see it, and they go. And that's okay. If it doesn't interest you, don't stay. If it doesn't interest you, if there's something wrong, let me know in the comments. Because I do want to fix things. Well, that may be as good as we're going to get. And I'll just have to hold it when I glue. But that's also there's a silver lining there, a little benefit, in that it leaves just enough gap for the glue. And that's a good topic to talk about. How do I glue parts together? I'm a big fan of the Tamiya Extra Thin Cement for both its adhesive and gap filling properties. I think everybody probably knows that if you put a bunch of it in your seam, give it a second, and then squish, glue will squish back out the seam and fill smaller gaps, which is pretty nifty. And the capillary, because it's so thin, it does tend to wick into seams nicely. But fill, you ask? How do you do it? Well, just like I'm doing now. Do need to be careful at times to not get a really thick blob of it on the brush that comes with it. And when you're applying the glue, it's best to take advantage of the capillary and put the bunch of it in a place where you're not going to see it. And then come back through like you're painting and just gently coat over. Don't go super thick with it. Let the tool work for you and just seep into that seam. Here we are. Now there's a divot up here, so I am gonna put a bit more extra, and I'm putting extra up here on top because I can sand and file that down, smooth it out, and then really squeeze. You can't see it on camera, but it's smooshing out of the seam, which is pretty nice. And I got a little bit too much on the brush, and I wanted to get these areas here, so I stuck it up into that bit there, so we don't end up with a massive blob of it on the surface of the model. And might need to clean that out. That's where our blades come in handy. Here we are. And I'm not at all concerned about any that's getting onto the outside of it, because that can be sanded down very easily. Just wiped off my blade. Setting that down. All right, that's adhered. We can put that to the side there. And the next part, you'll see me lock this down and open it up and lock it down and open it up. I have spilled it before, as you can see. Some spills while using it, some spills while refilling the jar. I like to use the same jar and just fill it back up when it gets low, because that makes it easier to get consistent amounts on the bottle brush. Okay, here we are. And I really like this chisel head for cleaning parts. These divots, that's really nice. Mold line. This has not even been fully cleaned yet. Cool. All right, sanding. Gently sanding. And there's just the smallest difference in size. Like this panel here has, this might be 1/10 of a mil higher. Like if you put a piece of plot plate on an existing panel in a full size model. So I got to be really careful not to sand that down flush. And then back here, following the panel line, let the panel guide next to it guide you, so you've got a good difference. And there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of sanding between to give you some elevation difference, if you want to call it that. And let the higher part be your guide, just like if you were scribing. And we are going to come back and scribe these, and I'm sure you're going to have a good laugh watching me do that. Again, when you sand minis, don't just stay in one place. Make sure your sanding surface is flush with the surface of the model, and that you're sanding the entire bit. Otherwise, you can end up with a divot or other inconsistency. And again, that really shows up a lot in these tiny models. Okay. And then along here, there's a little bit of a lift, and there's a mark here, a mold line. So I use the sanding stick again because they're generally flush. In this case, if I sand the backing down just a little bit, it's not going to cause any visual issues. So I'm just going to take the sanding stick, sand this side panel down too, because there's a little mold, really thin plastic flashing along the edge of this. And then do a little bit more here, because there's both a mold line and slight mold inconsistency, and that needs to be trimmed. There we go. Both directions flush. And we'll do the same on this side. So even if one side doesn't need it, visual balance. But if one side needs it, chances are good the mold line is still there, even if smaller. So just give it a little bit of a touch and even it out for visual consistency. Let's see how that looks. Pretty nice, but there are some ridges up here along this top, and it's a flat surface, which is perfect for this stick right here. So we'll just give this a nice go round to smooth that out. And since that's a join between big parts, we don't really need to be, we're not doing it to worry so much about how it's going to look when it's painted. We're evening it out for when it's joined to the other piece. Yeah. All right, that's up. Kind of hard to see. There's a little bump where plastic accumulated, so we're just ever so lightly removing that. And when you're going around and inspecting these little models for mold lines, oftentimes you're going to see them because of a shadow and not directly because you can see the mold line itself. So turn it around and let different shadows play on it. And there we are. I just see one along this edge of this panel. So ever so lightly. Gonna give it a touch with the sanding stick. And I was watching another builder's video this morning, and saw some comments from people wondering why in the world were they spending so much time detailing the bottom of a foot when you're not going to see it. Well, maybe you will see it. Maybe you won't. But it's the process. I'm probably going to say this on every stream, every video. Modeling is the process, right? This is what brings us the joy of the hobby. And you might think, well, Phil, why the heck are you being so nitpicky about all of these tiny little details? Because it brings me joy. I like knowing that when I've completed an assembly, I've done everything I can to make it look as good as I can. And taking the time now, I've learned after making many miniatures that paint shows a lot of crimes. And if you don't take the time before you paint to clean things up, you will likely regret it after you've started painting. It's a whole lot harder to go back and fix things, oftentimes impossible to go back and fix things once there's paint on plastic. Priming, sure. You can always go and sand it down, and surfacing, is a really good way to find the things. But again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So take your time and prevent as much as you can now. Now, for some reason, I've got the Muppets in my head. All right, so 2 good size pits and stress marks from when I removed it. So we're going to run the sanding stick along the edge at first. And then in the same direction relative to the back surface here, do a little sanding. Okay. There we are. That's smoothed out nicely. And then I just use my thumbnail to kind of polish it. These are actually like a very high grit sandpaper. You can do a good amount of plastic polishing, smooth out your sanding work if you were careful. All right, I see a whole bunch. A bit of flash along these other edges as well. So we'll just sand the entire edge of all of this. And see how it goes. There we are. And I'm sanding in the direction of the panel, not against, especially because of the edge there. If you go against the direction, is the best way I can describe it. If you run your sanding stick so it's abrading this direction relative to the panel, you can really cause issues, round off the edge. So you want to be sanding off the edge. Good, and you can just use your nail and clean it up without worrying about ruining that nice edge between the two panels. And I promise you, even with all this time put into it, we're gonna see things that we missed once the surfacer is on. And I kind of look forward to that. See how well I did versus the model. And it was kind of neat seeing other people, the really skilled folks who take nice long time and craft their model. Seeing them surfacing and then sanding, and how much of the surface of the model they have actually sanded to get things nice and smooth. This is another part. Now this part goes here, I think. Yep. So these sides are going to be our main, oh my goodness, our main visual. Any part you see glaring at the camera is going to be a big visual call. So make sure you've got it. Now this has a bunch of panel lines on the inside like a striped suit, but they don't match the lines on the outside surface. So I'm not terribly worried about ruining panel lines and joined panel lines between the two surfaces. But you will still be able to see when the legs are on. So we are going to, again, scribe and clean when the time comes. Okay. And looking at this one, probably won't be able to see some of these parts. Like there are circular mold lines, mold inconsistencies on the inside there. That's up to you if you want to remove them or not. I probably will, but I'm waiting on a set of God hand spin blades to arrive. Should be here according to Amazon on the 16th, so in about a week, and then I could use those to do some customization, cleaning, doing better. So we're not gonna completely finish this build until then, until they arrive. Or maybe we'll just use them on the next one. Now, why am I not using my knife to clean this like I did yesterday? Because that's a small panel with a very little, with another 0.1 mil difference. Sanding is a lot less likely to take a massive chunk out or remove too much at once. With the scraping, you can inadvertently remove too much plastic. So it's a lot more easy. It's a lot easier to be gentle with the sanding stick. But here, got a nice flat panel and some flash along the side that I can just lay the blade against and gently scrape. And again, I'm going multiple directions here. So that we don't accidentally create unevenness. That's a nice little stress mark. Exactly where the back of your hobby knife blade shines. Get the majority of that off and then sand it down. I am not going to do sanding on this ribbed portion because I don't want to have to scribe too much. I don't want to have to repair. I'd rather just enhance, and there are little mold lines along the edge, but the scribing tool should handle that okay when the time comes. So a couple passes with the sandpaper. And this feels like 600 grit. I'm not going to do this panel because there are some small details. I'll give this a slight pass. And this one is rounded, so I'm doing a light touch circular motion. Remembering to go both directions, clockwise and counterclockwise. That just helps on rounded surfaces. To avoid unrounding it. I'll tell you, I'm really looking forward to seeing this porous surfaced. Okay. Now I can see along the bottom edge a lot of white from where mold lines and flash got abraded off. So we're gonna take our trusty thumbnail, gently scrape that off. And I couldn't see that flash on the edge of this. So it's a good thing I sanded it down. And this part goes in the chest. Like that. So definitely need to pay attention to this portion and this portion here. Especially though this front side, since that's what goes up against the chest and is the most visible part, and where people are likely to focus their attention. The front chest and the head. So we'll spend a little bit of extra time getting rid of this edge, softness around the edge, so there's a cleaner connection between the two parts. Huh. This actually works pretty well. Just tried that on a whim, and it's a lot more gentle on the plastic than the edge of the knife or the file would be. But it's a little bit stronger than my thumb. Okay, this does need the knife though. There's an ever so small difference. Whew. And looks, not sure if that's intended or not, but it doesn't quite look like it. So I'm using the cutting blade, cutting edge of the knife, to lightly run along there and even that out. Even the blade with that super fine edge can be a good scraper if done very carefully. both for you and the plastic. It's still a cutting edge. All right. So rather than using sandpaper, because there are very little differences between segments of this, I'm going to use the blade of the knife to ever so slightly scrape that down. And I'm holding the blade at about a 45-degree angle relative to the plane of the plastic. I'm not holding it 90 degrees straight perpendicular. I'm holding it 45 degrees in the direction that I'm moving the blade, the knife. So we're shaving away just the tiniest little bit. And why am I doing this? To make a better fit. There we go. Oh yeah, see? I wish you could see this, guys. This is awesome. Now it looks like a proper panel line. After that's been glued, that's going to be that's going to fill in well with the panel liner and give a really nice difference between the two planes. All right, so we repeat that step with the other one. And all we're doing is going back and forth, smoothing things out. So I was watching a video the other day, and the guy was talking about his Holy Grail models, and the idea of that was interesting to me. I have never exactly thought about, is there a model that I want that I just can't get my hands on? And it would be kind of a holy grail that if I did. And honestly, I can't think of anything at the moment. My 40K armies are all collected. I don't really have anything or need anything more for them. The Macross models. I have the Veritech models for all of the main squad members. I've got Roy's VF1S or slash Rick's VF1A, the Max and Miria coloring, and the Ben coloring for the various Veritechs. I've got the male officer pod, female officer pods, a couple of those actually. So I could do Miria's coloring in her one, and Glaug. I'd have to look. And I could do, oh goodness, what's her name? What was Chiron's girlfriend later in the series? I forget her name. But I got one I could do hers, so we could have Chiron and the ladies coloring for their units. I've got I'm going to think of the Battletech and Veritech names, not the actual Macross names. The Tomahawk, I've got one of those. I've got the big monster, as it's known, Robotech. The Rifleman, the Archer. I don't have the missile, the big missile launcher, the one with big round missile pods on its sides. So that's one, I guess. But it's not as, I wouldn't call that a Holy Grail model. Just lacking. I'll get it next time I go visit the in-laws. This may sound kind of weird, unexpected for me to think about. Holy Grail models. Having not really been into Gundam in a meaningful way for most of my life, these artifacts are kind of like a Holy Grail. They have gotten me into the Gundam modeling, and that's really cool. That's a big deal for me. Because they're just about the perfect mix of model kit and miniature. I haven't touched the Macross stuff because it's too big for now. I don't really have a place to display them properly. So they kind of have to wait until I do. And I want to get better with airbrushing. But, I mean, let's face it, they're the HG equivalent of Robotech World. They're not substantial models. They're just kind of waiting in the wings because they're not something I can easily or cheaply get here in the States. And I don't get over to Japan but once every so often to be able to restock. In case I really screw something up. But when it comes to using artifacts, let's use artifacts in the context of my Holy Grail. I got it. I got it. I was really excited. It's the series 2, I think, and I put them all away. I can't really tell, but I really like the full armor Gundam, and I like the Stark Jagan. Those are pretty cool, but the Goof custom flyer type with that big old shield and gun on its arm is way cool. I can totally see myself using that on a tabletop. And that's going to be one of them that I'm going to spend extra time on to make sure that it is just right, because it is so cool. I can't say I have any preference towards the Xeon or Federation factions. I just like the look of different models, different units. And some kits, some grades, they don't look as good to me as other grades. So I could like, I saw Zaku 3 custom models at the store yesterday. Like, they were okay. No, they weren't calling to me, but Zaku 3 Artifact does. So maybe it's differences in designers. I don't know. Goodness, I've been talking this whole time with my microphone all the way up towards my ear. Don't know if you could have heard me or not. We will find out, but we're not stopping. This train stops for no one. We stream because I'm still learning how to record and edit, and there's a lot that goes into being a proper YouTuber, and at the moment I'm just sharing my hobby with people. It would be pretty neat if this could becomes a regular thing for years. Not saying it needs to be my job, but it would be pretty cool if we could build a community and hang out. And if at some point in the future it does become viable enough to be a job, cool. That's neat. If not, that's fine as well. Justin, the armed painter, a guy I really like his Battletech content, does a lot of philosophical rambling while he does his builds and paints. Bright guy. And he was saying, this world, we are more connected than ever, but more distant than ever. And you know what? That's true. I have moved an awful lot in my life. Work and life have taken me all over the U.S. I've lived just about every corner of the country except California. And I've got friends all over the country, but I don't live near any of them. My closest are 4 hours away. So yeah, I'm kind of moved where I am now in the middle, right as COVID isolation started. So being somebody my age, working professional in a new place during lockdown, it's kind of difficult to make friends. So I'm definitely connected to a lot of people, but distant from most everybody. So having a community of like-minded, cool folks to chat with about various hobbies, various interests, is something I would really like to have. But if you like Battletech and you haven't discovered him yet, the Armed Painter, ARMED Painter, really nice guy. He does a lot to support the Battletech hobby and people's mental health. Highly, highly recommend his channel. He's a bit of a goober, but I like people who are a bit of a goober. And if you haven't found them, let's talk about some of my favorite channels. As far as modeling goes, people that I actually listen to, Nico Suratos over in the Philippines for Gunpla building, her dad Dawn for miniature painting. I follow them pretty closely. Justin, the armed painter. Paul is bad at stuff. He's just fun to listen to while pop on his stream or one of his talk and builds while I'm building too, while I'm not streaming. There's another gentleman. I say it this Gunpla Dad Life. I'm probably getting that wrong. He's a dad who streams builds every week. Has a nice group of folks chatting with them. It's nice to listen to while I'm working. 40K modeling. There are so many. It's hard to say. The Feral Painter and Grimdark Compendium, definitely love them. The Feral Painter, I enjoy the quote unquote grimdark style because it's less detailed. Older eyes and hands can handle that level of intricacy. And the use of enamel washes and everything to get certain effects I like. This is 2 parts. I watch, or used to at least watch, a number of the larger 40K painting channels, but I don't know. It's 40K painting on YouTube. It's kind of a thing that, and not something I really watch hugely unless there's something I really want to see. Because with the community, the overall 40K community being so large, in order to become a larger channel and be a successful channel, you generally have to be painting to a very, very high standard, have really high production value, and for people who like the painting styles that those channels do, yeah, that works. There's some really good channels out there. I tend to like maybe more low key things, low key channels, personality. The personalities of the channel, I should say, low key. Which is kind of why I like Don. He's a little bit older. I know Nico's at least 21 now, so he's in his 40s and talks trash well enough. I guess I get his sense of humor, but I don't need to be painting my Warhammer to the level that folks like Squidmar, Ninjon, Biniac do. So I don't really watch them too much. Most of the time, if I'm looking for a kit bash or just ideas for paint schemes, is when I start really looking at the 40K painting scene with intent. But yeah, there's so many of them to fit a size and shape to fit everybody's interests out there. Ooh, that's a little too hard. So there we go. And then as far as artifacts, there are a couple really high-end artifact builders over in Japan. Hachio and Modeling Sun is a good one, but it's Japanese, so kind of hard for people to understand. But the build quality is good. The background music is chill. And the video quality is a hell of a lot better than mine. Okay, how's this looking? That's a big divot. We have a big divot here, folks. Definitely going to have to fill that up. Okay. Interesting to see. Yeah. Both. Both of these got hurt. I think with these, once I'm done gluing them, it's been an hour, 15 minutes. I'll give it another 15 minutes. So we have an hour and a half long stream today. I will probably finish this up, get these parts glued, and get the gaps filled off camera. So we have something a little bit more interesting to see tomorrow. Maybe I can even get it primed. We shall see. You know what, folks? Nature is calling, so I think that's a good time for me to call this stream. Again, I have been Phil, the miniature model maker. This is our Gundam Artifact Series 1 Unit 1 Rick Diaz build. Thank you very much for watching this after the stream. I hope you are all enjoying yourself. You're being warm. It's currently very cold on this January 9th, 2025. And remember, this is a hobby. It's meant to spark joy. Do what makes you happy and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.